Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at DxO's Photolab version 9.6. Now this version came out about a week ago and there were actually some very significant updates to 9.6 and kind of surprised me a little because in the past when you had these sort of interim updates between versions, they were usually pretty minor, like updating compatibility with cameras and lenses, some bug fixes, things like that, right? You usually had to wait for a whole new version before you got some significant updates, but not this time, which is a very pleasant surprise. So before we go any further, full disclosure, I am an affiliate for DxO and I am being sponsored for this video. That said, I do host weekly live streams where you can submit your images to me and I edit them here for you live in real time using DxO's Photolab 9. And I've been doing this for years, and I've been using DxO for years before I ever became an affiliate, and that's because I truly believe that DxO Photolab is the very best photo raw editor out there on the market today. I also want to let you know that I have my affiliate link down below along with an exclusive discount code. So if you click on my affiliate link, robtrek.com/DxO, and then use my coupon code RobTrek, you can save 15% off for new customers only. Now, a common question I get about buying DxO is like, is this like a monthly or annual subscription service? And the short answer is no. You pay one time and you get a perpetual license for life for that version. And that includes up to 2 years of updates, which is typically like, DxO Optics modules and camera compatibility and bug fixes, and some of the updates like we're going to be talking about today. Also, you can install DxO on up to 3 computers, and it doesn't matter if it's a PC or Mac, or if you have both, you can install on the PC or Mac on up to 3 computers. And then the last thing I want to clarify is that you are buying a license to the current version, which in this case is version 9.6. If and when DxO Photolab version 10 comes out and you want to upgrade to that, it's not mandatory, you don't have to. But if you do want to upgrade to version 10, then you will need to buy an upgrade license. All right, so let's get into the fun stuff and talk about what's new and exciting about version 9.6. So now we have DeepPRIME XD3 for both Bayer and X-Trans sensors. So that means, Sony, Canon, Olympus, Fuji, just about every camera supported now. And I pulled out some images here. Here's one at ISO 12,800. You can see how amazing it can reduce the noise and pull out all of that detail. Also, the colors are retained very accurately and just, with good saturation. I found this crazy one here at 102,000 on my OM1. Just look at the detail it was able to pull out where it could. I'm just amazed. It took virtually an unusable picture into something that is actually semi-presentable. And this is why I chose DxO Photolab years ago, is because of the denoising algorithms, the optical corrections, and the editing workflow. And I think the general consensus is that DxO Photolab is unmatched when it comes to raw editing software and the final output that you get from your images. Now, another thing they've updated in version 9.6 is the AI masking tool. Now, AI masking was actually introduced in version 9, but it's been kind of a rocky road, particularly for Windows users since its release. But now in version 9.6, they've fixed a lot of the bugs, and now it's working very smoothly, much faster, more accurate, and they've added an additional tool called a diffusion slider. So I'm going to use this image again as an example. So first thing I'd like to do is just go ahead and denoise and sharpen and some optical corrections. And now let's go over to the AI masking tool. So I've selected it here. And what I want to do is just darken the background a little bit to separate the bird from the background. So I'm going to use the AI tool to just quickly select the background, and you can see how fast it is. And then I'm going to go ahead and darken the background very simply. And I'm going to exaggerate this a little and just do roughly a full stop of difference there. And that looks pretty good, but really it almost looks like the bird was kind of cut and paste into the scene, right? But what they've introduced now in 9.6 is this diffusion slider so that it will, kind of feather that exposure between the masked and unmasked areas. So I'm going to go ahead and do it right here. It's right underneath the opacity slider. And I'm just going to crank that up to 100%. And now you can see the bird looks a little more natural in this masking. It doesn't look like it was just kind of cut and paste. And to improve this even further, I can just change the opacity level a little bit too. And there, I think we have a very nice transition between the subject and the background. And the background is darker and everything looks great. So we'll just do a quick slider so you can see the difference. But that's the before. And that's the after. So there was a huge improvement in AI masking tool in terms of its speed and accuracy and stability, because now in version 9.6, it takes advantage of what's known as the Windows machine learning runtime. And as the name implies, this update is only for computers running Windows, and because it's taking advantage of this new AI technology, you will need to have some updated hardware. So it's compatible with the NVIDIA graphic cards from the RTX 30 series and up, and or you need to have the Intel Core Ultra processor that has the new AI technology as well. Now, the next significant update to version 9.6 is what they call their High-Fidelity DNG Compression. Basically what this is a way for you to take your camera's native RAW files like your .nefs, .orfs, .arws, etc., and convert them into a more standardized file format that just about any photo editor can edit. Now, if you're already using some other photo RAW editor like Lightroom or Photoshop, you know that it can already handle just about every type of RAW file, so why bother converting your camera's native RAW file into a DNG format? And this is part of the reason why DxO created this high-fidelity DNG compression, is so that you can take your camera's native RAW files, denoise them, apply optical corrections, and then compress them into a very small size to save a ton of hard drive space, and then continue editing in your photo editor of choice. So let me show you some examples of the different file sizes, say between the camera's native RAW file, a compressed DNG, a non-compressed DNG, and an edited compressed DNG. And there could be some significant changes to your workflows here as well. So we're going to take a closer look at that after we look at these examples. All right, so this is a native RAW file from my Olympus Pen F. It's a regular shot, 20 megapixels, and the file size is currently 16.8 megapixels. Now let's export this as a non-compressed DNG file without doing any corrections or editing. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select no compression. And we won't give it any file name changes here, and we'll just simply export it. All right, so here is the uncompressed DNG file, and now the file size is 71.1 megapixels. So you can see there's a dramatic increase in size. Now let's look at the high-fidelity compression export. So let's go back to the original RAW file. We're going to do export to disk. This time we're going to select high-fidelity compression, and I'm going to add a suffix to the file name, just -c for compressed, and click export. Now we're down to 16.5 megapixels, so it's significantly smaller than the non-compressed DNG, but it's about the same size as the original RAW image. So now you can take your camera's native RAW files, apply denoising and optical corrections, and then export them as compressed DNG files, which will save you a ton of hard drive space compared to the non-compressed DNG files. Now, this has made a huge difference in my own personal workflow for my clients, because typically I would go on site and I would take 100, 200, sometimes 1,000 images while I'm there. And then when I came back, I would simply process them in DxO using the denoising and optical corrections and export them as non-compressed DNGs. But now that we have this high-fidelity compression, I'm saving a ton of hard drive space, and I'm not losing any quality or flexibility in my editing. So just to show you an example from a recent job, take a look at these folders. So these are the camera's original native RAW images. So I'm just going to select them all and then see what the properties are. And we come out to 105 files, 1.82 gigabytes. Now, under the previous version, I would export these from Photolab, applying the noise reduction and optical corrections in the regular DNG non-compressed format. And if we look in this folder, and I'll just select the DNGs, and we look at the properties of this, you can see that we have 105 files, but now it's at 7.03 gigabytes. So, nearly 4 times as large, right? Now, using the compressed DNG, high fidelity compression, let's just do that. And we'll go ahead and select all. So we have 105 files, but this is only 1.6 gigabytes. So it's actually a little smaller than even the original RAW images overall. Now, I have this workflow because I have to do a ton of things in Photoshop that I cannot do in Photolab, like layering and exposure blending, sometimes some panorama stitching, and a number of other things that really are pretty exclusive to just Photoshop. But I still much prefer to use Photolab to pre-process the images for the denoising and optical corrections and sharpening before editing them in Photoshop. And using this new high-fidelity DNG compression, I can save a ton of hard drive space. In fact, I'm thinking about going back to my other folders and reprocessing the DNG files to the high fidelity compression to, again, save additional hard drive space. Now, I mentioned earlier there may be some significant changes to your workflow, and that's because the High-Fidelity DNG compression has replaced the previous options in version 9.5 and earlier, the denoise and optical corrections only DNG and the all corrections applied DNG, as you can see here. So let's take this image here. So I'm just going to first just apply some denoising and sharpening, chromatic aberrations, and then I'm going to go over here to color. I'm going to change the white balance, something like that. And then I'm going to go over here and just click on Smart Lighting, Clear View, and let's add some contrast like this. And then we'll do some optical corrections to defisheye this. And then let's crop to a 16:7. And just go ahead and center that somewhere around there. All right, let's go ahead and export this as with no compression first. We'll call this NC and export and see what happens. All right, so it came out over here. And as you can see, basically it applied the cropping and optical corrections and noise reduction, but it didn't do any of the exposure changes that I made or the white balance, like anything to do with color and exposure, lighting. It's not going to get translated into or converted into the DNG file. And if I export this as, let's go back to the original. If I export this with high fidelity compression, and we'll just say unique name. So the file turned up over here. And we got basically the same thing as we did with no compression. We got optical corrections and noise reduction, but we didn't get any of the color or luminance type changes to the file converted into the high fidelity compression. However, we still have an excellent DNG file that we can continue our workflow in some other photo editing software, and it's highly compressed. We saved a lot of disk space. It's now just 7.76 megapixels, say, compared to the original raw image, which was 16.9 megapixels. So I think this change was more of an arbitrary one than a technical one, because DxO felt like a DNG export should be more consistent with what a DNG file is supposed to be, and that is an unedited raw file. That said, I hope they bring this option back in future updates to apply all corrections to a DNG file, because it's kind of been in Photolab for years now, and I know many of you have probably developed a workflow around that, and it may disrupt that workflow because of this change. That said, you can still export it as a 16-bit TIFF file with all corrections applied while still maintaining full editing latitude. It's just the file size are going to be much larger. Now, the last thing I want to mention is the DxO Optics Module, which in addition to their AI noise reduction is one of their key technologies to giving you the very best output. Now, I'm going to demo it for you here because a picture's worth 1,000 words, but basically it's a database of thousands of camera and lens profiles tailored specifically to that camera and lens combination. And it's going to tailor corrections in a very intelligent way. So for example, it's not going to just sharpen the entire frame when you apply sharpening. It's going to apply the sharpening only where it's needed. And then it's going to eliminate vignetting, it's going to fix distortion, and numerous other aberrations. So I have this image zoomed in at 200% so you can clearly see the difference. So first thing I'm going to do is just simply apply the DeepPRIME XD3. And now I'm going to apply the optics module or lens sharpness optimization. And you can see there's a dramatic difference. All the softness is gone from this image, and I can clearly see the fine feathers of this hummingbird. And remember, this is an ISO 4000 image. Just amazing what it can do. Now I'm going to put a link down below so you can check to see if your specific camera and lens combination is supported. And odds are it is, but if it's not, you can actually put in a request to see if they can add support for that specific camera lens combination. Now, I haven't even touched on all of the editing tools and controls that you have in Photolab, along with what I think is the very best and most intuitive workflow. But version 9.6 is an incredible and welcome update to what I think is already the very best raw photo editing software out there. So I invite you to give it a try. Again, I have my affiliate links down below with discount code. And I also invite you to my weekly photo editing live streams where you can submit your images to me and I edit them for you live here on YouTube. And I also do open Q&A, so I'm sort of like your virtual tech support for Photolab for the foreseeable future. But I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.